Oh boy. Hi everyone, Anthony Fantano here, the internet's busiest music nerd. And it's time for an album review. The Spits. But before we do this review, first order of business, this is our old font that we use. I'm now going to use this font. Why? Because I want to. How long will I keep using it? Until I feel like using another font. Mwah. The Spits are a modern punk band who spit in the face of the assumption that all modern punk rock is clean, primped, and created pretty much just for radio play. They've been doing that for well over 10 years now, and have several EPs and several LPs and some splits and singles to show for it. This self-titled LP is their latest, and while I didn't think it was their strongest release, it's definitely a fun listen and furthers the grimy style that they've been peddling on pretty much every one of their releases. Now, I started off right with these guys years ago by listening to their self-titled LP first. Their self-titled debut LP first. They have a lot of self-titled releases. If I'm correct, this is actually the fifth thing that they've released that is titled The Spits. But still, for me, this first LP is the catchiest thing and the most accessible thing that these guys have released so far. With tracks like Skate and Die 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 and Black Car, this album is just a really distorted, mid-paced punk rock album that is both mind-numbingly simple, but also kind of hilarious at the same time. And this album is no different. Though if there is one noticeable change on here, the Spits on this release continue playing with the keyboards and weird sounds and noises and vocal effects and drum machines that would pop up here and there on previous releases. So as the Spits kind of continue to play with their old sound, but also kind of toy with these new electronics in this continuously fuzzy and distorted and grimy aesthetic, this album has kind of ended up being a mixture of older and newer sounds for these guys. There are some really straightforward guitar, drum, and vocal tracks on here that are kind of in the Spits' usual style, like the opener, All I Want, which is a very fun, bouncy love song. It's got really silly lyrics, but it sticks in my head, and I love the low-toned, deep distortion on that track. And the wailing guitar in the background, it's killer. It's just got this nice, fuzzy, grimy feel to it that I can really sink my teeth into. The way these guys play, the guitar tones, the drumming, and just the recording quality just reminds me of like a combination of the Ramones and Wire, but like a little more lo-fi. And speaking of the Ramones, I know they've always had an influence on the music these guys play, but this is the first time I would say I heard a Spits album where maybe I heard a little bit more Ramones worship than I usually do. On tracks like Brick by Brick and My Life Sucks, the guitar tone, the vocal delivery, the chords that the Spits are using, just all of it just bleeds Ramones. The only thing that I think sets the Spits apart is that they're a little dirtier, they're a little more atonal, and their songs are definitely shorter. And shorter, keeping in line with other Spits releases, every song on here is short as hell. In fact, this whole release is short as hell. It's 12 tracks, and they clock in at just over 18 minutes. So even if you hate this thing, it will not be taking up too much of your life. So anyway, the tracks on here that sound like the Spits' usual stuff. Some of them are good, some of them are okay, just nothing amazing, nothing new. But the songs that really kind of caught my ear on here were the ones like Tomorrow's Children. That track is like an electronic piece of drum machine punk that would have caught a pretty penny on eBay if it had been released in 1979 and was pressed on like 107 inches or something. It's It's got these wailing keyboards in the background and just these really throbbing, driving drum machines and these really highly manipulated vocals that kind of make the vocalist sound like a robot or an alien or something like that. You know, from a sci-fi movie. It sounds like the Spits, but yeah, it also kind of reminds me of bands like Blank Dogs, you know, just this bedroom rock project. And the last track on this album, if that single I mentioned did exist, could have easily been the B-side. But outside of those two tracks, it's hard for me to pick moments on this album that I feel stick out in the Spits style. It's hard for me to pick moments on here that really kind of stick out in this album because so much of it just kind of feels samey, 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 samey for me. If the songs were longer, I guess it would be a bigger problem. But overall, I just kind of admire the feel of this album. It's filthy, it's weird, it's odd, it's drooling all over itself in some kind of fierce rebellion against cleanliness and sanity. When it comes to punk music, these guys are uniquely lethargic, noisy, mean, nasty, and ugly. I really like the foundation that this album lies on, but I'm not exactly in love with what the Spits end up building on it, I guess. What I feel like the Spits have built on this foundation with these songs is kind of like a disgusting, roach-infested opium den. It may be fun to watch from afar with binoculars, but it's no place I'd want to visit without a gun or a drug habit. And I get it, that's probably intentional. This album is more about the sound for me, and that's cool. The Spits do make some interesting sonic choices on here, like the bloopy keyboards on the track Electric Brain. And it sounds exactly like they're using a chain link fence as percussion on the song Wanna Be ADD. The sounds are cool, but I feel like the songs could have been written to be catchier or more memorable, really. The Spits don't really display themselves as good songwriters here, and I felt like that did come into play on their earlier releases. Because as I dug underneath the grime of each song, I found that some of the tunes on here were good, and others were just kind of forgettable. And overall, I'm just not really finding anything on this LP that is all that new for the band. In comparison with their last album, there's a lot of instrumentation that is shared with this LP, though the recording on here is noticeably better. I don't think these guys are necessarily breaking any new ground on this LP, but still, they're consistent, and if this is your first introduction to the Spits, it may not be a bad place to start. I thought this thing was a likable listen, feeling a light to decent 6 on this, but if you've heard it, what do you think? Do you love it? Do you hate it? Why? And what do you think I should review next? Anthony Fantano, The Spits, forever.